Ladies and gents, welcome back. We have a pandemic in this country, and no, it's not some common cold from the Orient. No, it's substance abuse, and these substances have been destroying the lives of Canadians across this country. And not only that, but the behaviors of the substance abusers have been terrorizing communities across Canada. Now, the United Conservative Party is attempting to do something about it. Now, many people are asking, is it going too far? And well, let's hit both sides of this one because you have the hyperbole from the usual mainstream media sources, and then we'll hit some of the other sources here. CTV News talking about this. The UCP is considering a law that would force people with severe drug addiction to be placed in treatment without their consent, and that's the big issue here, is the without their consent. Now, here's the article here. The UCP is considering a law that would force people with severe drug addiction to be placed into treatment without their consent, according to documents obtained by the Globe and Mail. Now, of course, there's a lot of situations where one pundit says this is what the legislation does, and then other people say that this isn't what the legislation does. So let's get into this. A Compassionate Intervention Act would be the first involuntary treatment law to target addiction in Canada. Some jurisdictions, including Alberta, already use mental health laws to push people into drug treatment without a court order in exceptionally severe situations. The Globe says that the legislation could give police, as well as the family or legal guardian of drug users, sweeping rights to refer adults and youth to involuntary treatment if they pose a risk to themselves or others. There is a TV article by CTV about this, so we'll show a clip from that as well.
A local harm reduction group says the approach could lead to more overdoses.
They're put into severe withdrawal as a result of going into these, so it really is like torture. If people aren't ready for treatment, then we can't force them into it.
The Globe's freedom of
Now, before we move on, I'm not sure what people mean by, are we ready for treatment? I think because it affects the whole community. If somebody is addicted to these drugs and their behavior because of it is affecting the community's ready for it. And I think that would be a case in this point, that a community would be ready for them to get off of these illicit drugs. I don't know if it's the user themselves who calls it. Anyone who's addicted to anything, if you've known anyone who's had an addiction, it is really, nobody is ever ready to get off of the substances that they're addicted to. It often remains the case that it takes an intervention to make these things happen. Whether it's an intervention in their lives, like everything falls apart, or somebody steps in and makes a change.
Information request covers hundreds of pages of emails, internal reports, and government analysis of laws in Australia, Portugal, Massachusetts, and Washington state.
We have to actually look into what's happening in these countries and whether it's working in these countries, because if we are going to limit individual charter rights in this manner, it has to be evidence-based.
A statement from Mental Health and Addiction Minister Notley.
Now, before we move on, I know a lot of people are thinking, well, it has to be evidence-based to restrict people's fundamental rights in this country. We had these arguments recently, and we've had them over the past 3 years when it came, or at least the past 2 years, when it came to interventions, when it came to COVID-19. Now, it seems the same people who are advocating the other way are advocating for this, or advocating a different way. The same people, by the way. But let this run. I'll let this continue here.
Nicholas Milliken's office confirmed the potential development of a Compassionate Intervention Act and directed CTV to a Stanford University professor who has been advising the government.
We have multiple studies showing that people who are under a mandate to go to addiction treatment have outcomes that are about the same or sometimes even a little better than people who don't.
The former Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addiction is keeping an open mind.
All options are on the table. I think we have to do whatever it takes to make sure that we protect people. It's part of that recovery-oriented system of care.
Any new legislation will have to wait until after the May 29th election. Nicole DiDonato, CTV News, Calgary.
So like I said before, I would cover some other points of view. So here's True North talking about the same situation. UCP government considering law to force addicts into treatment. Alberta's United Conservative Party could introduce a law forcing drug addicts into treatment if re-elected in May's provincial election. The legislation would be the first involuntary treatment law in Canada to specifically target addiction. The bill would be called the Compassionate Intervention Act. This could be introduced in the legislature at some point this year. Colin Atkinson, spokesperson for Addicts and Mental Health Minister Nicholas Milliken, said that the Premier tasked the office with bringing forward recommendations to improve interventions for Albertans with addiction who may be a danger to themselves or others. He said that the Compassionate Intervention Act would put forward as part of the efforts to explore a variety of options. So this isn't a do-all, end-all blanket thing that's going to affect everyone, but it will be proposed for certain cases. At this time, no decisions have been made by the government of Alberta, Atkinson told True North. We will continue to build out a full continuum of care, including prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery. There are Albertans who are struggling with addiction that can be compassionately supported in their pursuit of recovery. Now, Alberta's NDP leader, Rachel Notley, who does not respond to inquiries from True North, told the Globe and Mail the legislation is too punitive and is doomed to failure, both from a treatment perspective and a legal one. We all know that she does not like to answer questions from certain journalists. We saw this
as much
recently.
As we have in the past taken questions from your bosses, your institution, we will not be answering questions.
What? Jagmeet Singh had this to say about other politicians who don't like to answer questions.
They attack journalists? Like, what leader, what strong leader spends time attacking journalists?
Good question, Jagmeet. Good question. Now, Western Standard also writing an article about this. UCP government considering the development of involuntary drug treatment. The UCP government appears to be considering a potential development of compassionate intervention in the province to help people struggling with addiction. Now, none of these articles really even get into the fact of, like, the actual facts in the proposed legislation and who this will affect. What will this actually bring forward? But of course, immediately, as both sides have been talking about this, you have the independent media and then the legacy media, as some people call it, have been talking about this. Hyperbole ensues online. We have Dr. Shazama, inner city ER doctor, social justice advocate, so a social justice doctor, weighing in on her emotional response to this.
Hey everyone, so I'm just getting in the car on my way to pick up my kids after school, and I just read an article about this proposed legislation from the Alberta government called the Compassionate Intervention Act, where they can force people against their will to be put into abstinence and recovery programs. And I wasn't expecting to have this reaction, but this is so messed up and completely violates the rights of people. And unfortunately, this is a population that most of the general population can't identify with, and so they don't care about them. And so it's just this population that has nobody to advocate for them at all. And they continue to just be forgotten and die without services that they need, without harm reduction, which has evidence behind it. We all know this, and get forced into recovery. And this is just wrong. It's wrong, and it's devastating.
Last time I checked, recovery was a form of harm reduction. Recovering from anything is ending the harm in the situation. So I don't know how to respond to that, but I'll throw out Marty Up North's response to that. I have a really good buddy who's an EMT in Alberta. He says half of his calls are for overdoses. He says it's common for addicts to get mad at him after receiving a dose of Narcan, which is supposed to dilute or get rid of the effects of the narcotic that's in their system. You ruined my buzz, is what people say. They get pissed because they can't get high for the next day. Apparently, I guess that's an effect of Narcan. You can't just go get more drugs. It won't work. I guess there's a limit to how much sympathy we can show people. I just wish these social media doctors would simply pick a lane. Are we in favor of forced interventions like vaccines? Or are we going to respect bodily autonomy and the concept of informed consent? And well, I'm going to have to agree with Marty on that one. Now, Pierre Paulie, in a recent interview, talked about this drug pandemic and what he would do moving forward as prime minister if elected.
I'll stop giving out taxpayer-funded drugs. So-called safe supply, in theory, was supposed to give addicts drugs that wouldn't kill them. It's done exactly the opposite. They take the government-funded drugs and they sell them to kids. Why? Because they're not powerful enough. And so they sell them to kids, take the profit, and use it to buy fentanyl. That kills the addict. It gets the kids hooked on the hydromorphone provided by the government. The kids find after a while that's not strong enough. So what do? They sell the hydromorphone to another kid who then gets addicted. And then they buy fentanyl and they kill themselves. So my policy is rehabilitation and treatment, not taxpayer-funded drugs. Finally, I'm going to sue pharmaceutical companies.
And then he goes into suing pharmaceutical companies for this. But yes, it seems that the compassionate decisions that have been brought across by Liberals and NDPs, even though they sound compassionate, it's the whole road to hell is paved with good intentions. When it sounds compassionate, maybe, just maybe, these policies actually create more drug addicts in the first place. So this is, well, I'm going to leave this one up to you. Is it going too far to forcibly put people into these interventions? Is it having an involuntary aspect to people who, and we're talking about people who are committing crimes to fulfill the needs of their addiction. And while normally we would, police would have the tool of putting them in jail or putting them into intervention because of, just the fact that the use of the drug is illegal. But in Canada, we've been, especially here in British Columbia, been eliminating prohibitions on these drugs. So leave it to you guys in the comments. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about this whole scenario. And well, we'll see you in the next one. Keep on trucking.